Welcome back, guys. It's Sami, and we've got Nick back here, Nick Trakoff, the Wolf from Roto Street Journal, coming back to join us for the second part of our bold predictions episode. What's up, Nick?
No, not too much, man. Happy Sunday, happy weekend. Excited to get back on the bold prediction train with you. Love the last episode. And,
Yeah,
and
man.
running backs are my favorite position, too, so I'm happy to get to the running backs. Love tight ends, too, so it'll be a fun one. Tight ends are like the interesting one where you make the right bold prediction and you gain that edge. It could be huge, and both of us have a couple guys that aren't in that Travis Kelce tier yet that I like yours a lot, too. I just ready to get into this. I'm ready for a good bold prediction episode, man. I always enjoy going with you.
Oh yeah, man. I know a lot of people. They had a lot of feedback from our quarterbacks and wide receivers episode. Really positive feedback. So thanks so much for that, guys. But Nick, yeah, let the people know where they can find you, where they can listen to the Fantasy Fullback Dive podcast. Let them know.
Absolutely. Fantasy Fullback Dive is the podcast that will pave your path to 2019 titles. FFBDpod.com is where you can find my podcast. It's a product of Roto Street Journal, rotostreetjournal.com. On all your social medias, just search Roto Street Journal. We'll be there. And me personally is at Roto Street Wolf on Twitter. So hit me up. I love chatting. And as I mentioned, if you first heard it last time, I got a couple of new followers that said they were teachers as well, which is awesome. I'm a teacher. I'm on summer break. So this is kind of my zen where I have a lot of time and I can just chat and interact with all you guys. So please make sure to reach out. Find me at Roto Street Wolf. Would love to chat with any of you.
That's awesome.
And you as well. Where can my listeners, because we're going to play this audio on my podcast too, just to make sure they can connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks so much for that. So I'm Draft Room Podcast on all your listening platforms. So whether that be Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, you name it, it's Draft Room Podcast. Go ahead and leave a review, leave a comment if you like the stats that I bring, if you like the correlative metrics, because that's really what I'm all about, Nick. It's really about correlating those relevant stats that indicate success year over year. So you won't hear me talking about yards per carry. You won't hear me talking about anything like that too much, just because it's descriptive and not really predictive. So that's really what we focus on here. But on Twitter and Instagram, I'm always dropping nuggets of information. That's at Draft Room Pod on both of those platforms. A lot of my listeners, they seem to get a lot of value off the little stats that I do drop. And I'm always constantly interacting, just like you, Nick, always constantly interacting with my audience, answering questions, things like that. But really excited to jump into this show with you. I love running backs, too. I think that's everyone's favorite fantasy position.
Yeah.
And I'd like to kind of start it off here, right, with the first bold prediction. And this is a bold prediction that I kind of posted on my Instagram, my Twitter. So if you follow me there, you definitely heard it first. But the bold prediction is that Le'Veon Bell is going to finish outside of the top 12 at the position. What do you think about that? Just like first glance, like what are your thoughts?
It's hard to think because he's been, consensus 1 or 2 for so many years. That it's hard to even imagine him outside the top 10, never mind, an RB1 you're saying he's not going to be a number 1 running back. It is tough to picture that. I can understand some of the hesitation. I mean, the Pittsburgh role was so invaluable, that offense. When as if this is your first time listening to me, I always emphasize the fantasy stock formula, and a big part of that is surrounding talent. It's one of those indicators we think creates value, and of course, the surrounding talent hit going from Pittsburgh, where the line was beastly, where you had Antonio Brown and Juju on the outside taking up defenders and all that, and now going to New York, where it's a lot more of a question mark. What is Sam Darnold going to be? What are those outside receivers going to be? That line is pretty damn atrocious, and they haven't really made too many additions to it. So I can see why he'd drop. I still, personally, I'm excited to hear why you have him outside your top 12, because I think he's going to see enough volume, and I think Sam Darnold will be good enough to keep the offense productive that he'll still be a top 7 or 8 guy. I think I have him as my RB8 right now. So I'm intrigued to see what you think will have him drop so far. But I do definitely have him knocked down from that top 1 or 2 pedestal he's been for so long. And I have some interesting stats about Adam Gase and different things I'd love to dive into, but I do want to hear your take first, because this is your bold prediction.
For sure.
Why are you so down on Le'Veon? Let's hear it.
All right, so the one thing that you stated starting off when I asked you, you said it's hard to imagine him outside of the top 12 just because he has been so dominant. Completely agree, man. Like, the guy's talented. That there's no question about that, where if the guy does get the workload, we know he's going to beast, right? But here's the thing. That's kind of what the whole fantasy community is taking it as, where Oh, he's been dominant, so he will be dominant. That's not really true because if you look at his time in Pittsburgh, right, not just the line, but also the volume that he got, Nick, from 2013 to 2017, he was seeing 19.8 touches per game, and he got 94 or more targets in 3 out of 5 years. And out of those 3 years, he actually got more than 100 targets. And he was averaging 6.4 targets a game in Pittsburgh, right? So that level of involvement, let's try to translate that and what that means for Gase's offense. So Gase with Miami, the last 3 years, Miami's ranked 18th, 32nd, 25th in terms of rushing volume. A lot of those running backs that were under him in Denver and in Miami, like Noshawn, C.J. Anderson, Ronnie Hillman, all those guys, nobody under Adam Gase's tutelage has passed the 19.8 touches per game that Le'Veon Bell had from 2013 to 2017. So if you go back to 2013, you look at Noshawn Moreno, 15 touches a game. He had 74 targets, which was, by the way, the highest target volume that any of Gase's running backs have ever had. 2014, C.J. Anderson, Ronnie Hillman, they kind of formed a committee. None of them really got too much work. I think the lead was like 11 point something touches per game there. But then you look at 2015 in Chicago, Matt Forte, 16.8 touches a game, and then Miami, Jay Ajayi, 17.3 touches a game in 2016. 2017, only through 7 games before Ajayi tore his ACL, was he getting 19.7 touches per game. So that's just under the 19.8. And, of course, that's over a 7-game period, so that's not a full season workload. And then 2018, obviously, we know what happened with Gore and Drake last year, where Gore was seeing only 11 touches a game. Drake actually had 73 targets last year. But, like, other factors combined into that, though, Nick, the guy hasn't played football. He hasn't played down in over a year and a half, right? Like you mentioned, this O-line is really questionable at best, especially the fact that they don't have a center, and you really need a good center to pull off that zone blocking scheme that Gase really loves to have. You really need an athletic center that can get to the second level and make blocks, ahead of Le'Veon Bell as he's running. And I don't think they have a guy that can do that right now for them. And then you just look at Gase's history of utilizing a committee when he has it available. And then you look at the roster now, where they have Elijah McGuire, Ty Montgomery, Trenton Cannon, Bilal Powell even is back. So combine that with like the clear content that Adam Gase has for Le'Veon Bell's contract. The GM's no longer there. Gase is kind of the guy pulling the strings now. You look at Le'Veon Bell's current ADP of round 1, pick 10, RB8. I don't think he's going to return that value, just given Gase's history and given the volume that his backs see.
Yeah, I would say the biggest counters to any of that is one, just none of those guys you mentioned, whether Moreno, Ajayi, any of those guys. Forte is great too, but even still, I don't know if any of those guys are on Le'Veon Bell's level. I mean, when he's on the field, there's nobody that can do the versatile things this guy does. He's probably, in my opinion, the best pass-catching back in the league. Still a big, thick guy that can handle 20-plus touches. I mean, that's the Le'Veon Bell workhorse. That's the pinnacle workhorse. And, I mean, yeah, nobody else has matched his 19.8 touches per game, but this is a guy that's led the league in touches multiple years, and that's kind of his thing, his style of game. And I can't imagine a team shells out the amount of money that I get that the GM's gone now. And that's one of the things that has me most worried is like Gase has that comments about how I would never put that money on Bell and all those kind of weird tension type building things. I don't like that. That makes me nervous too. I get that. Yeah. But I mean, to think about what some of those guys did, I get they didn't average the volume that Bell did, but they still had, I have the list of stats. I mean, Moreno, almost 1,600 total yards, 13 total TDs. Anderson, 1,200 total yards, 10 TDs and only 7 starts. Forte, 1,300 yards, 7 TDs in only 13 games. So you extrapolate that. It's a pretty good pace. Ajayi, 1,400 total yards, 8 TDs. Those are all still pretty damn good stat lines. I would like to know like where those actually ended up lining up in terms of, was it top 12 numbers? But those are pretty good numbers from much lesser talents, in my opinion, than Le'Veon Bell, who is that kind of pinnacle style workhorse. And Gase he has commented before, this offense is most dangerous when we have a 3-down back. You don't need to substitute. I don't like to take guys out. So yes, he's lately done committees with Gore and Drake, and it's kind of made us have this gross taste in our fantasy mouth, but he's never had that type of Le'Veon Bell what he has had, a guy that could be as versatile as Bell. He has given him, I mean, those touches were, yes, under the 19.8, but still 17, 18 touches a game, especially for a guy like Bell. He'd do a lot of damage with this. The one other other thing I wanted to point out too about the line. An interesting stat I found on them. Yes, they were horrendous, 25th ranked in 2018, the 30th ranked in 2017. They've been awful for 2 straight years. But one run that they've actually been really strong at is the outside zone run. Their backs, I forget, this is Pro Football Focus I found this. Their backs averaged 2.07 yards before contact on outside zone runs, which was the best in the league. And obviously, if you're crafting your run game around Le'Veon Bell, I mean, nobody's better at a zone run than this guy with the patience and vision he brings to the table. So you hope Adam Gase recognizes that. They did bring in a beastly offensive guard in Kalisha Osmele from the Raiders. So you hope they take a nice step forward and they kind of match what they do well to the strengths of the running back as well. And I think even if he doesn't get that 20-ish touches per game he was getting in Pittsburgh, he won't. And nobody does. That's such a valuable role, that Pittsburgh workhorse. I still think 17, 18 or so, this offense takes a decent step forward under Darnold. That'll be enough with a guy of Bell's talent to at least keep him inside my top 10 so far. So we'll see, but that's where I stand on him.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And, it's good that you brought up the outside zone run, because the outside zone run blocking scheme, it's a lot more difficult for an inexperienced center to pull off, a guy that's not as athletic. So I think that's the biggest concern. Like, people don't realize how important that center position is in that zone blocking scheme, especially if it's an outside zone blocking scheme.
Yeah.
And, like you had mentioned how, Drake really, Gase hasn't really had backs to utilize. I mean, I'd argue that Forte is pretty much where Le'Veon Bell was. And Forte, I think that year finished as the RB12 actually in Chicago under Gase in half PPR. But I think
do you mind if I ask, was that in points per game or was that in overall? Because I know he only played 13 games that year. So is that 12th in points per game or 12th like overall? Because that's pretty impressive in 13 games to finish as the RB12.
You're absolutely right. He did not finish as the RB12. He finished as the RB 17. Sorry,
and it was 12 in points per game or something.
12
of that
and
nature.
12 in points per game.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha.
So, listen, he can still be productive. I just think the value of, RB8 at the back of the first round, I don't think that's an appropriate. Like, for me, I wouldn't reach for Bell. I would personally want to grab him in like middle second, back second, and I know for a fact he's not falling that far just because of the name value.
Who are some guys you're looking at where Bell kind of goes that you'd take instead of him?
Great question. So around him, you have guys like Joe Mixon going right before him.
I'm with you there. Yep, check that. Yep. We're in agreement there.
Absolutely. James Conner's a little bit shaky to me just because, Jalen Samuels, Benny Snell, we don't know for a fact if he's going to have that locked and loaded workload. But a guy that we're going to talk about in just a second, one of your bold predictions, I'll let the audience figure it out.
Perfect, yeah.
Yeah, I'll let the audience figure this out. But I'd be more than happy taking this next guy here.
Interesting, okay.
Over Le'Veon Bell.
Okay. Interesting. Yep. Yeah. Should we go right into this guy then?
Tell the people who the guy is. Yeah.
And I know that your listeners are a huge fan of this, or at least they know you're a huge fan of this guy. I'm a diehard fan of this guy, and I want to just reiterate, it's Dalvin Cook, and I say my bold prediction, if he stays healthy, he's going to easily top 2,000 total rushing and receiving yards because he's the perfect fit for Kubiak's zone blocking scheme. I'm a diehard fan of Dalvin Cook. I'll get the ugly out of the way. Of course, the injuries are a huge concern. He missed almost all of his rookie campaign outside of 3 games. He missed a ton of time last year, and that has to give you pause for concern. Am I going to put this early second-round pick into a guy that's only going to give me half a season or so? And there's not a great counter to that other than he was mostly healthy through college. Some of these, an ACL is an ACL. The modern science you can come back from a lot more. Last year, you're focused on recovering and rehabbing, and it sometimes might take that full year to get yourself back under, your legs back under you. And I feel like we saw Cook finally get himself together over that last stretch of the season, especially when they got rid of DeFilippo and went to Stefanski and became a little more run-heavy and started to feature Cook. That's when we started to get a taste of, okay, this is what this guy can truly do. So I judge him a lot more based on the last couple games of last season than I do, because that was a lot more comparable to those early rookie games. So I just see this guy that dominated, when he got the touches, was getting a ton of touches, and seemed like that next prototypical workhorse guy that would be a featured offense. And then you get Gary Kubiak coming in, who couldn't be better as a bell cow breeder. I did it out. I looked at 22 seasons of Gary Kubiak stats, literally listed out every single running back. 22 seasons. Yeah, I had my girlfriend, want to come to dinner? Yeah, I'll be right there. Just got a couple notes I got to take care of. 22 seasons, like January. I'm looking at Gary Kubiak's running backs. Kind of a psycho I am. But 22 seasons, 15 of them have topped 1,200 yards from scrimmage. Over 13 have been over 1,480. 10 have been over 1,600. So nearly half have gone for 1,600 or more total yards. And 7 have been over 1,800. And when you look at that, so that, again, 15 of 22. And 5 of those 7 misses were injury related, whether it was somebody getting hurt and they were dominating and whatnot. When you gave this guy a supreme talent, Gary Kubiak, we're talking about Terrell Davis, Clinton Portis, Arian Foster, all of those guys went for 900 total and 18 plus TD monsters. And you still had no names, Olandis Gary, Mike Anderson, Ruben Drones, Steve Slayton topping 1,510 TDs. So you give me a Dalvin Cook, and this guy I'd say is much closer to the Clinton Portis and Arian Fosters, not as proven and hasn't shown that he can be those guys over a full season yet, but in the flashes, he just looks much more, not like a pedestrian, like a Mike Anderson, like an Olandis Gary. He looks much more elite in level of the Terrell Davis, Clinton Portis, if he can put it all together. So that's why I think is as long as we get 16, I look for those guys where it's every other box checks other than risk. Because once, if he does have that full 16, I think we all forget about the fact that he had those 2, really cut down short beginning of his campaign. I think this could be the year that really launches him into all right, Dalvin Cook is one of the best backs in the league. He's in the perfect scheme to show that. And by this time next year, we're all taking him in the top 5 or so of our fantasy drafts.
Yep. And, just circling back around to those injuries there. So the first year, obviously, towards ACL.
Yeah.
And the second year, last year, it was a hamstring injury that really stemmed from that ACL recovery, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't like you can't label the guy as injury prone. Like just because a guy goes down with an ACL tear doesn't make him injury prone automatically. Like that stuff happens, right? Yeah. I get it. It was, I believe it was non-contact. We were trying to make a cut.
It was, yeah.
Right. And what was it, like week 4? I think it was week 4 that he went down, right? It was devastating to see, man. But like last year, I know a lot of people were expecting really big things. And, I think the people that aren't going to draft Dalvin Cook are the ones that have really gotten burned from him over the last 2 years. But I want you guys to know, listen, there's no risk of re-injury here. He's more than a year. Almost 2 years removed from that ACL tear. He's going to be a year removed from that hamstring injury. And if you look at weeks 11 to 16 last year, he was the RB9, and that was with Kevin Stefanski. That wasn't even with Gary Kubiak. So I think the addition of Gary Kubiak as an offensive consultant, I think a lot of people are underestimating his role in that offense and the type of modeling that they're going to take from his game. And apply that to Dalvin Cook. So I'm right there with you, man. Dalvin Cook is actually my 6th ranked running back heading into next year.
Nice.
So I'm really high on him. I try to hedge my bet here where I didn't put him in the top 5 just in case, but I'm extremely high on him there.
And I think one other thing to mention with him, too, I completely forgot, was a major concern was the line. And I'm not saying overnight they're going to be a million times better, but they did spend the 18th overall pick, their first-round pick, on Garrett Bradbury, a very athletic center. The whole thing on him was he moves well. He's an excellent run blocker. And literally, our guy Dane Brugler, who we love, said would be ideal fitting for a zone type of blocking scheme, which is, of course, what Gary Kubiak makes his money on is the zone blocking. So just to add just a little bit of line could make that huge. You can now take the center and move him to guard, and it gives you a little more flexibility. And Gary Kubiak's made a ton of magic out of horrendous lines in the first place. So just to have a little bit more of that added on. He also has a good history of throwing to his running backs, too. A bunch of, I think 6 of his last 9 have caught at least 40 balls. And Cook had 40 receptions last year, and that was in this awful kind of scheme while he was injured and for, only played 11 games, too. So I'm a big fan of that. And you mentioned Stefanski. The last thing here is they went from a 67% pass to 52% pass ratio when they switched from DeFilippo to Stefanski. So I think he's fully on board with that Gary Kubiak, which is historically right around a 50-50 balance. It's not going to be a thing where, Stefanski is technically the OC, whereas Kubiak's the advisor, but they seem very aligned. You got Mike Zimmer as the head coach, a defensive-minded guy. They kind of all just want to feature that run, and they really haven't added much. I've seen a couple people mention, now Alex Madison, it's a 4th-round rookie, definitely gives you a nice little handcuff option, but they have not given him any real competition, so clearly they believe in him right now, right? They're all in on Cook, it seems. It's a run-focused offense, and they haven't really done anything other than beef up the line and bring in run-centric minds.
Yep. And Alexander Madison, I think, is a really, really good handcuff to Cook should anything happen. But again, it's not a threat to like his primary workload. I don't see him being a threat.
Yeah.
It's just not going to be just because he does like to feature a workhorse. Gary Kubiak does. So all on board right there with you, Nick. I mean, I love Dalvin Cook this year. Let me ask you a question though.
Sure.
If you had to choose between Dalvin Cook at the 204 going as the RB10 right now, or another injury-prone guy in Leonard Fournette, who's going around later at the 301, who would you want to lean with there?
Definitely Dalvin Cook. I just think the talent when I've watched them play, like Fournette had some beastly runs as a rookie and really did look like a monster at times. But his injuries history dates back to college, and it's more of like the foot and the ankle and the stuff that you just see constantly recurring. And then you look at him, John DeFilippo, we're kind of shitting on it being too pass heavy. That's now the offensive coordinator in the Jacksonville scheme. So it's like, to me, there's so many more boxes checking for Cook in terms of I like the talent better. I think the scheme's going to be better fitting. I like the overall team and the scoring touches he's going to potentially have. It's just all that checks off so much better for Cook that I'm much more willing to take that 1+ round earlier investment on him than, say, a Fournette. I'm not out on Fournette, but I think often when Fournette goes too, there's guys like Devonta Freeman or sometimes Josh Jacobs as a rookie falls. I could see myself eventually taking David Montgomery, even though he's going around 5 right now. Maybe by draft day, even if he's going around 3. I know the fact that he falls like 5 and 6 blows my mind. I could see him jumping up to round 3 or 4 by the time people realize how much of a workhorse that guy's going to be. But I'm not necessarily avoiding Fournette. He's just a guy I don't see being on a lot of my teams this year. Whereas Cook, I am targeting right there in round 2. I would love to have him this year.
Yep. And I totally agree with you because like guys around Fournette even are like Marlon Mack, Aaron Jones, and also a third guy who I would hands down take over Fournette. I would take this guy over probably a lot of these backs in this range, including Marlon Mack. Maybe not Aaron Jones, but I take this next guy over Fournette hands down. And I'm talking about Kerryon Johnson. All right, Nick, this is the guy that you've been waiting for. Right, you don't understand my love for him, and a lot of people don't really understand my love for him. Right,
I'm excited to hear it. I really am. I can't wait for this. I love this. Yeah.
Listen, so with Kerryon Johnson, right, he got a split workload in the beginning. He was being integrated to the offense with a team that's historically not known for running the ball, right? Took him 3 weeks. Took him 3 weeks to rush for 100 yards and break that record. I forgot exactly how long the record was. I think it was with who was that? Who was the last rusher that rushed for over 100 yards?
Would
you
it have
remember?
been Joik Bell, maybe? I can't even remember. No. It was even further back than that. Like,
anyway,
Barry Sanders probably.
No. Yeah. Like back in like the 60s, right? Back in like the 70s. But no. So with Kerryon Johnson, the biggest thing here, right, is you have to look at the moves that these teams are making on their rosters. Let's take a look at some of the receivers, some of the tight ends that these guys have added. You look at Tommy Lee Lewis. You look at Danny Amendola, who has history with Matt Patricia. Some of those short, quicker passing route guys, the guys that can run out into the flat, quick crossers. Then you look at what they did in the draft and what they did in free agency, with the tight ends especially. I mean, they have Logan Thomas there, who they signed from Buffalo, who's primarily been a blocking tight end. Jesse James, who's primarily been a blocking tight end in Pittsburgh. Isaac Nauta, who they drafted in the 7th round. And do you remember their first pick in the draft there, Nick? You remember who they took?
Yeah. They took, obviously, Hawkinson, right? Yeah. The man.
The myth, the legend. This guy puts defenders in the dirt.
Yes. He is a great run blocker. I'll give you that for sure.
He's a Gronk level run blocker.
Yeah.
And I think he could develop into I think the comparisons to Gronk are pretty fair here as well, where he does have the pass catching skill set. But they drafted this guy 8th overall. I think that indicates a lot to what they want to do with this team, especially because they brought in a guy like Darrell Bevell as well. And Darrell Bevell, if you guys don't know, he was the offensive coordinator for Minnesota and for Seattle from 2006 to 2015. All right, I'm going to dive into his stats really quickly. I'm going to show you his historical metrics and his volume that's given to his workhorse running backs. So the total rushing attempts by his teams have been about 488 total team rushing attempts. The average lead running back volume out of that has been 60%. 60% of that workload goes to that lead back. That's 292 carries. I get it. He had Hall of Famers and Marshawn Lynch. He had Adrian Peterson. I totally get it. Those guys are definitely workhorses. I'm not saying that Kerryon is going to see 292 carries for sure. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that if you look at the volume just by itself, this team is going to be a top 5 rushing attack, number one. And Kerryon just really needs to see about 50% of that workload to cross that 300-plus threshold of touches. And if you can get that 300-plus touches in right now the back of the 3rd round, I mean, you're just kind of stealing candy from a baby at that point. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
If he gets 300 touches, then I'll be all in. I will be with you because I think we chatted about this last time. Like, this is a talent I believe in. When I watched him play, very impressed. And if you told me Kerryon Johnson's getting 300 touches this year, then I'm with you. I will believe it. And I get Bevel has that run-centric history. I saw a stat earlier, and I was like, I thought every time I see something about Kerryon Johnson, I always just think of you right away.
Just tag me, bro, and everything.
I need to start, yeah. But it was is Bevel's had a running back carry it at least 280 times in 8 of 12 seasons as a play caller. So I mean, yes, Bevel is run heavy. I can't argue that, and I think that's a huge reason why Kerryon could break out. But I think Bevel and Kerryon in light of that, are going to be anchored by the fact that Matt Patricia is just such a moron. I know he's not the play caller. He's a defensive guy. He's not the one calling plays. But him and Bob Quinn, they both come from the Patriots, and both of them have been on record multiple times this offseason saying this is a committee system. We never want a workhorse back. We like a system where we can preserve our guys. So if he can do what he started to do at the end of last year, great. But this isn't our style of system. That's always been what they've run as a line. And then he wasn't really able to shake LeGarrette Blount last year. Why would he be able to? They bring in then C.J. Anderson. I'm not sitting here saying C.J. Anderson's this incredible world-breaking talent, but he looked pretty damn solid there for a stretch with the Rams. Was outproducing the hurt Gurley at the time, and I would say it's not too much of a stretch to say he's at least better than what LeGarrette Blount was bringing for the table. So if he couldn't shake Blount and he couldn't shake Reddick, who was stealing all those receptions, why would he suddenly be able to shake a better version of LeGarrette Blount? Hopefully Riddick's gone. I know there's some rumors he might be on the roster bubble. That would certainly make me feel a lot better if he's gone. I just always get nervous of drafting guys that could be stuck in what I call between the 20s purgatory, where Anderson comes in at the goal line and Riddick comes in on 3rd down situations. And you get this guy that, he maybe sees those 15 or so carries a week, but they all come from in between the 20s, and it's like, okay, he gets close to 100 total yards, but when you remove touchdowns and you remove receptions, that's a huge part of fantasy scoring. And I am a little wary based on that committee history, based on the comments from both Patricia and the owner, who I know you're probably going to say they're not the ones calling the plays, but they will influence the weekly game plan. If they like a guy to not really have more than 12 to 15 touches a week, they're going to make sure that's heard and eventually make sure that's happening. I don't know. If he can shake that history and that trend, great. But I am a little more nervous about C.J. Anderson and Riddick stealing those very valuable fantasy touches. Yep.
So great points that you made there. Now, I'm kind of going to go into, you already refuted the Theo Riddick thing where he definitely is on the roster bubble. They re-signed Zach Zenner. They don't need the Theo Riddick, even though Theo Riddick has the most receptions amongst all running backs since 2014. It's kind of crazy where the guy just gets used as a scat back primarily. Mm-hmm. But you say that he really couldn't shake Blount last year, and I don't necessarily agree with that because I don't think it was him shaking Blount. I think it was just him coming out as a rookie and Patricia already going in with the mindset like, hey, we're a committee, we're not really going to feature a workhorse back. I get that, but if you look at with Jim Bob Cooter, a guy that's notoriously known for stretching the verge, stretching the seams with his four vert concepts and all that, Cooter, who's a high flying offensive caller, under him, in week 1 to 5, I'm going to go into Kerryon's share here. From weeks 1 to 5, when Blount was there, Kerryon only saw double-digit carries just twice. He was averaging 10 attempts a game, 3 targets a game, 2.5 receptions, and he only had 1 rushing touchdown that time. But he was still the RB27, right? This is him as a rookie coming out playing second fiddle to a very inefficient Blount. He was still the RB27. Now you look at weeks 6 to 11. He had double-digit carries in 4 out of 5 games, jumped up to 13.5 rushing attempts, 4.8 targets actually, 3.8 receptions, 3 total touchdowns, and he was the RB 15.5 PPR scoring there. And that's just with 13.6 rushing attempts and 3.5 receptions right there. And just with 3 total touchdowns. May I remind you that. Even if C.J. Anderson takes that goal line role, even if C.J. Anderson splits 40% of the workload here, and Kerryon gets 50, and the rest of the 10 goes to Zach Center, let's say, right? Even if that 50% is still there for Kerryon, based on the volume increase, the total volume increase in terms of rushing attempts, in terms of targets to the running backs, where Darrell Bevel usually targets his lead running back about 42 times a year, I don't see him finishing outside of the top 12. It's just not going to happen just with that volume of touches. He was actually the RB16 last year, Nick, from weeks 1 to 11. If you extrapolate his entire season before he went down with injury, he was the RB16 despite that slow start, despite that split work, and despite Blunt vulturing those touchdowns. So just imagine what can happen with Darrell Bevel here.
I hope so, man. And I hope so. But then the other question is, like, is he going to be able to handle that volume? The second he started to become a workhorse last year, he broke down. And I'm not sitting here saying he's injury prone.
No, he didn't.
Of course. He's out week 11 on. Like, he didn't play the rest of the season.
That was an MCL injury. He didn't break down. That was a weird angle that he got tackled.
I don't know.
For sure.
I'm just saying.
I wouldn't call that.
I'm not a believer in injury prone. I'm just saying, like, as soon as he finally started to see usage, maybe it's his running style that exposes him to awkward hits. It's not necessarily they broke down, but I don't know. It makes me nervous that he didn't see a ton of volume in it, and historically, Patricia comes from an offense that is always unpredictable, and that their whole thing is about being unpredictable and having committees and sharing the work. So again, if there's signs that he's going to be seeing that volume, and especially at the stripe, then I'm going to be okay. If Riddick's cut, then I'm going to have a whole new opinion on this guy. But I don't know. Three-headed committees and offenses that aren't that inspiring in the first place. I mean, where are the Lions going to really finish in terms of total points? Probably around the bottom 20. When there's three cooks in the kitchen, if one of them's removed, I'm going to feel a whole lot different about it. But until Riddick's cut, or until I know Kerryon might see some goal line volume, I really struggle to see him getting the volume I think you're projecting him for. If he does, I'm with you. The talent's great. I think he's hyper efficient. I think he's going to be great if he does see that. I still don't fully buy, even with Bevel there, and I know a lot of metrics point to it. I'm just looking at this season with this team. I don't know if I see it.
That's fair, man. That's totally fair. I understand the bad offense argument here. But if you look at Kenyon Drake, who still finished as like the RB17, I think it was last year, and a team that ran the least number of plays in general. Yeah. I mean, I think that argument also is on shaky ground, where even if it is a bad offense, I mean, that's good because Kerryon is a pass catcher and he's kind of game script proof where when they're behind, when they're trying to have those.
If Riddick's gone, that would be huge. Like, that's what I'm saying. If he becomes that guy and his games flow and he can be in there and those, that's what I'm nervous about right now, though, is they get down early and it becomes kind of more of a Riddick show towards it. So again, if that's going to be Kerryon, I'll flip this switch pretty quick. When you believe in the talent, I'm able to. You could convince me eventually, but until I know that's him and not Riddick, I can't be ready to jump all in with you like this.
No doubt. No, that definitely makes sense, man. Good points there.
You too. No, I like what you're saying. Like you're convincing me. Like if the Kerryon you're envisioning, I see why you think it's a top 12. I really hope that's the truth because I love him as a player, and I would love it for fantasy to have that type of talent be unleashed that way. So I really hope what you're saying ends up being true, and we start to get signs of that in camp. I'm not willing to bet quite yet, just because Bevel's history. I am a big believer in coaching trends and whatnot, but I can't sink it in my that style pick where he's going. And there's guys. I'm trying to think of some other running backs. I mean, isn't it in the same range as like Freeman and even Fournette? Isn't that kind of where Kerryon goes right now?
Yeah, so Kerryon's going right now at the 308. Devonta Freeman's going at the 307.
Yeah.
Derrick Henry's going at 309, and Josh Jacobs
come on, give me
310.
Derrick Henry. I would take Derrick Henry so far above any of these guys.
Oh, my
and it's
God.
Not even a question.
Nick, you're a Derrick Henry truther?
I think it's just because I've gone all in so many times. You know those guys that you can't stop, you can't quit. I like to call it I can't quit you, Derrick Henry. I can't quit him because I know as soon as I do, he's gonna have that ridiculous 1,620 touchdown season that I've been expecting of him. And I am a truther. I mean, when he gets the volume, he's done nothing but destroy and steamroll defenses. And I really think there's almost nothing in his way at this point. I mean, Vrabel's already come out and said, Arthur Smith, the new offensive coordinator, has already come out and said, the way he rumbled at the end of last year, we don't want to mess around. We want to give him a chance to do that for the entire season. So as long as he gets the opportunity, I feel like when we've seen him get 20-plus touches, I don't have the exact stat because we're not doing him, but I feel like it's like one of those things, you're getting 150 and 2 TDs, and you're like, why is this not happening every single week? Why is DeMarco Murray still getting touches? Why is Dion Lewis still getting touches? And now at this point, I want to believe that they finally realize, this guy is a mammoth built like no other. Let's feed him 20 times a game and watch him just get 100 in I mean, he was the number one scoring running back once they did start to feed him for those last, and obviously a lot of that's buoyed by when he just destroyed the Jacksonville Jaguars, just ruined the city of Jacksonville.
You remember that one stiff arm on Miles Jack?
Oh, my good God. That's what I'm saying. That, when you see shit like that, it's like, that's why I'm still a truther, no matter how many times he's burned me.
Makes sense.
That's like, and I guess that kind of illustrates those guys. You're going Kerryon every time in that range. I wouldn't even think bat an eye to take Derrick Henry in that same price range. So I guess that's part of the argument for me too, is where he goes, they're just guys I like a whole lot more.
Interesting. See, I'm willing to reach for Kerryon, even early third, late second. That's kind of the range where I'm comfortable.
I love it, man. This will be an interesting one. We'll see. We got our bet board, right? We got Hopkins on there. I think Kerryon is going to have to be Kerryon versus Henry. Why don't we put that one on there? Kerryon versus Derrick Henry?
100% down for that.
Cool. So we got Hopkins. Perfect. We got to start typing this board up. We'll have a nice board by the end of the year and figure out a prize. Maybe the loser will have to come out to wherever the winner does, and we go out to like a steak dinner or something like that, like a nice dinner.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, something like that. We'll come up with like a total cumulative of all the bets. Whoever has the best record by the end of it has to buy the winner a steak dinner in their hometown or whatever.
I'm down. Remember, awesome. I live in New York City, so things get a little pricey here.
We're only got like a $600 bet here now, aren't we? I love it.
All right, so let's move on to the next prediction. What do you got here, Nick? What are some of these guys?
Absolutely. So I listed a few names at once. It was hard for me to pick just one, and I don't think the prediction is actually fueled by picking just one because it's almost the concept of the prediction. But what I wrote was at least one of Darrell Henderson, Latavius Murray, Carlos Hyde, and Donta Foreman will finish the season as a top 12 running back. And those are all guys. The reason I kind of lumped them in together was they're all guys that are going beyond round 9 and 10 right now. And again, so those are the names when you consider penny stocks who I think can blow up. Those are the running backs that I think genuinely have a shot to blow up. And the concept behind this is the handcuff idea of getting the guy in a absurd offense. I actually kind of want to throw Jalen Samuels or Benny Snell into this type of conversation as well. I just don't know which one it is yet. But you look at these, you look at least two of those offenses. The Chiefs, number 1 in total points. The Rams, number 2 in total points. The Saints, 4 in total points. And any one of those systems just thrives on kind of that workhorse, 3-down, multifaceted running back. So in that sense, like you got Damian Williams there with the Chiefs. I think he's the guy. I'm a believer in Damian Williams. I'm taking him everywhere mid-round 2, and I love it. I still believe in Todd Gurley for the Rams. I know you don't, but I know a lot of people don't, and he's a huge risk. But I still think he could be the guy. And obviously Alvin Kamara, a ridiculous beast of himself. So are there huge roadblocks to pretty much all those guys I listed outside Donta Foreman? Of course there are, but all it takes is one of them to go down, and I think you're getting a weekly top 7-ish style back if Carlos Hyde was the Chiefs' workhorse, if Darrell Henderson becomes the Rams guy. And of all of them, I think Darrell Henderson has by far the most standalone appeal in that he could be a 12-12 back and still have Gurley on the field. It could be like that Ingram, Kamara, where both of them were top 4 running backs for the Saints just 2 seasons ago. I wouldn't be shocked to see that happen with the Rams this year. Saints, obviously, Kamara would have to be removed for Latavius Murray to, well, maybe not obviously.
Why is that obvious?
I just literally cited Ingram and Kamara were both top 5 running backs 2 seasons ago. So we gave those awesome touchdown metrics. I know you said, Latavius Murray, the most touchdowns since 2014 other than Todd Gurley, right? Something of that nature. I mean, a guy that's probably going to stand alone. And that's the other kind of part of this is at least a couple of those guys, Murray and Henderson in particular, are kind of what I call handcuff with benefits, that you probably are going to get some flex style value out of these guys even when the starter's there. But if the starter went down, you're looking at a top 5-6 weekly play. So when you go at round 10, this is more the concept behind the bold prediction. You got to find those guys where it's like they're going to be on your bench anyways. What is the best case? What is the ceiling? And again, Darrell Henderson, Murray, Hyde, and Foreman, any one of those four. Foreman, kind of the only one here that maybe right from the start could be that featured guy. I know there's reports Miller's slimmed down. He's looking better. But Miller's awful. I'm so sick of him. And Foreman, there's tons of positive praise coming out for him. I more lump him in here because not so much the Texans were that explosive as an offense. They don't kind of fit that profile for last year. They were 11th in scoring. Not bad, but not in that top 5 range of those other 3 guys I listed.
Right.
But just 2 seasons ago, when Watson was healthy, when they had all their weapons as rookie, they were averaging over 40 points a game. That's higher than what the Chiefs were doing last year. So I think there is a case for the Texans to get back into that top 5, and whoever is the guy getting those scoring opportunities has top 12 upside, and I really hope it's Foreman. So that's kind of the concept behind it, is that late round, maximize your ceiling. What's the best case? It's whether it's an injury or not. I think Murray, Henderson, and Foreman already come with some, and Hyde, if Williams goes down, any one of those guys could be top 5 running backs by the end of the season in those roles. Yeah. I love loading I'll have 4 backup running backs on my bench. That's fine in that sense. I guarantee you at least one of those guys is top 12, maybe multiple.
Yeah. I totally like that. And, just going off of Foreman there, obviously Alfred Blue is no longer in Houston. And Alfred Blue, who's a pretty underwhelming running back, I mean, he himself had 170 touches in this offense last year. Oh. So I mean, if you just think about how much more talented.
That's horrible.
That's horrible,
Alfred
right?
Blue had 170 touches last year?
Unbelievable.
Oh, God.
He had 150 rush attempts. He only got 499 yards on those 150 rush attempts, and then he saw 20 receptions for 154 yards. So crazy inefficient, but the volume was there. And like you had mentioned with this offense, I feel like it's going to be very explosive this year. I think, with Titus Howard at tackle now, gives a little bit more time to Deshaun Watson to kind of stand and deliver a little bit. And he'll have those plays where he connects deep with Hopkins and Fuller and even Kuti over the middle. So I think that the receivers coming back healthy, an improved offensive line, Deshaun Watson is 3rd year. I think that lends to Deontay Foreman getting involved, whether Miller's involved or not. But with Latavius Murray, man, I love Latavius Murray the most out of this group, just because.
I was going to say, which is your favorite? Yeah, how would you organize this group? So Murray's the top?
Yeah, so Murray at the top, and to be quite honest with you, I'd probably take Jalen Samuels before I take Carlos Hyde here, just because I know Jalen Samuels will be involved. I mean, he was dominant in that stretch where Connor did go down. He was getting peppered with targets, and I feel like in PPR formats, Jalen Samuels could be a really sneaky guy that you can get at the back of the 9th round. He's going at the RB45 right now. And then obviously Carlos Hyde, he's part of the most explosive offense.
Yeah.
So you got to think about that value there, where if Damian Williams does go down, Carlos Hyde is a locked-in RB12, at least.
What do you think the Steelers would do if Connor is to go down? Do you think it becomes, last year was the Jalen Samuels show. I know they drafted Snell, who's been a monster in the college game as a workhorse back. Do you think that would become more of a committee, or like what do you think the Steelers would do in that situation?
So it's really interesting, right? Because obviously we saw Jalen Samuels take over as a lead dog, but there was really no one else there. With Benny Snell, as much as I don't like his talent, I don't think he's that good, even though he did have that workhorse history where he was receiving like 250 touches a year in college. I don't think he's that effective, but given this offensive line and just given the run scheme that Tomlin likes to run and just all those together, I think both those guys could potentially sustain value. I think you're getting an RB3 at worst out of both of them.
Okay, I gotcha. Interesting. So, and you said you'd go Murray, and then who would be, if you were like ranking them right now, if you're drafting today, what would be the order you take these guys in?
I take Latavius Murray first out of all of them, and I think that's reflected in his ADP because he's going in the 7th round as the RB33. So I take Murray out of all of them. Next up, I would probably take Deonta Foreman before Carlos Hyde, but I'm thinking just like in general where Carlos Hyde might have some standalone appeal, where Damian Williams could be used as a primary pass catcher.
Sure.
And Carlos Hyde could have the early down work tied up. He's a really good running back still. I don't get how people don't think he is. And I think Jalen Samuels will be last just because I'm pretty confident that Pittsburgh continues to ride their bell cow there.
What about Henderson? Is he the last of all of them, or Darrell Henderson? Where does he fit into all that?
So
I know
Darrell
yeah.
Yeah, Darrell Henderson is actually right after Latavius Murray for me.
Okay, cool.
I totally forgot about him. Yeah, so it'll go Latavius Murray, Darrell Henderson, Carlos Hyde, Deontay, and then Jalen.
Gotcha. Yeah, he's the guy that no matter what I do in a mock draft, I take him every single time in like round 7 or so, just to remind myself like I'm getting this guy no matter what, whether I own Gurley, whether I don't. When they compare him to Alvin Kamara, I don't think it's that ridiculous, especially when you look at the offense and how efficient and effective they are with their running backs. Gurley's a great talent, no doubt, but this guy is a whole different level of explosive. So I can't wait to see just standalone-wise how McVay uses this guy. Never mind if Gurley's arthritic knee does end up flaring up and you got this guy as the focal point of the backfield. I think either way he's going to have a beastly season, but man, I foam at the mouth when I think about Darrell Henderson as a round 7 pick. Like there's no more upside than that guy, other than maybe Latavius Murray and the touchdown upside he brings, but the explosiveness of Henderson puts him to the top of this group for me, and then Latavius Murray quickly after. They're kind of like in a tier a little bit above these guys. I think you can start them even without the starter being out, but if the starter was out, both those guys are just insane. So those are like the handcuff with benefits clearly towards the top of that group, in my opinion.
Yep, no, I definitely agree there. I just wouldn't say that Henderson is more explosive than Todd Gurley. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't even comp him to Alvin Kamara. I do have problems when people do that. I don't think he has Alvin Kamara-like abilities. I think Kamara is like a generational talent, where Henderson, he's an explosive back, sure, and I think he's being put into a really good system, and I think he'll thrive based off that fact alone. And then if Todd Gurley goes down, I think it's just you've got a league winner on your hands. So totally agree with you there. But let's move on to tight ends here. I mean, so the position that many people kind of forget about, don't really like to talk about, and kind of have a hard time ranking with tight ends as well. So my first bold prediction with tight ends, if you looked at my rankings, obviously you saw that I had Jimmy Graham and Mark Andrews ranked in the top 8. If you haven't checked those out, go check those out on my Twitter and Instagram. And
I'm more not talking about those. Are you kidding? I saw that. Oh man, Jimmy Graham. No, we'll talk about those later. You have your prediction you want to make now. If we have time, we'll talk about those 2 at the end. But oh man,
more than happy to talk about those. And I totally get that. Where people are like, why the hell do you have Howard? I mean, why the hell do you have Jimmy Graham and whatnot ranked in the top 8? But let's talk about O.J. Howard, who's actually the subject of my bold prediction here. I'm projecting O.J. Howard to finish in the top 3. And people automatically assume the top 3 are going to be automatic finishes by Kelce, Kittle, and Ertz. And I don't think that's as guaranteed or as much of a lock as people might assume. Because if you look at last year, right, Nick, like he finished as a tight end 11, O.J. Howard did. And he did that despite missing 5 weeks of the season, which is 33% of the entire season. He still finished as a top 12 tight end. He only played 10 games. He only had a 7.6% target share. And he also got injured in week 4. I mean, they had their bye in week 5. He didn't really miss any time, but he still sprained his MCL, and he was back on the field in week 6. And this guy was averaging 10.5 fantasy points a game in half PPR, which was tied for 5th with Derrick Cook, right? But if you look at per reception basis, this guy's a monster when he's targeted because he's getting 3 points per reception, which was number 1 amongst all tight ends, even above Travis Kelce there. And if you look at the top 12 tight ends here, Nick, I mean, he's the only tight end in the top 12 to have less than 50 total targets. Just think about that for a second, right? For a guy to produce at that level with that limited volume, I mean, the next closest guy there was Vance McDonald with 66 targets. O.J. Howard had 48. So a whole 18 targets more, and Vance McDonald was still the tight end 12, 1 spot behind him. So just the metrics that O.J. Howard presents and he brings to the table, especially in a Bruce Arians attack where I get it, a lot of people are going to say that Bruce Arians does not utilize his tight ends traditionally, but guys, he hasn't had a talent like O.J. Howard, someone that could be split out into the slot very easily and be targeted 12 yards, 15 yards down the field, no problem. So that's kind of my love for O.J. Howard. I really feel like he could break into the top 3. I think he's elite in terms of his talent and his fantasy production. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm with you all the way. I absolutely love O.J. Howard. I've reached to get him in round 5 or so in almost every single draft because of just how tantalizing he is. I don't subscribe at all. Me and you talk about coaching scheme and whatnot a lot, and I'm a bigger believer in it than most. But there are definitely outliers when you look at like what talent did this guy have versus what is he presented with now. I mean, he had to work with what, like Rob Houseline and Jermaine Gresham over his Arizona career. He didn't really have much of a tight end presence. He had like Heath Miller, who's okay for a couple years over there in Pittsburgh, but still, it's Heath Miller. Like, they're not 6'6", they're not 250 pounds, and they don't run 4.5 40s. They're not faster than Mike Evans on their own team, which is just insane. The size and speed this guy brings to the table. The fact that we've seen it routinely utilized as well over the last couple years. There hasn't been a better vertical seam stretching tight end than O.J. Howard. These last couple of years, you look at it, 16.6 yards per catch in back-to-back seasons. That's absurd for a wide receiver, never mind a tight end, which is insane. And then Bruce Arians, you look at his offense, it's all about 1, mismatches, 2, getting vertical. There's not a better vertical mismatch weapon out there right now than O.J. Howard. The only concern for me, of course, is health. He's missed significant time these last couple of years. But if you were going to guarantee me 16 games, I think top 3 is totally reasonable. So I'm fully on board with this one. I'm trying to get O.J. Howard in every league because the upside he brings in rounds 5 or 6, I think, is unmatched, and he could be a humongous edge at that position. So I'm all about it, and I love seeing people say, oh, Bruce Arians hates tight ends. He's only going to go 4 wide, never use it. He's never had something like O.J. Howard. So I can't wait to see how he uses this guy. And we had Trevor Sycamore on our podcast, a Bucks insider, and he was saying the one guy he thinks is truly going to explode this year is O.J. Howard, who's already been exploding. He just hasn't been able to stay fully healthy for those years. He was gushing about how he's looked in spring and how fast he's out there and how he just how deep he's getting on his routes. I just can't wait to see what O.J. Howard does this year. I'm so pumped for him. I'm with you.
Yeah, man. And, talk about getting vertical and going deep and going fast. I mean, this guy, out of 34 of his receptions, 11 of them went for 20 or more yards. So that just kind of speaks to the talent that he does have, where he's really explosive. And I think Arians, even if he does choose to go 4 wide at most times, utilizes O.J. Howard being split out instead of in line. So totally love this, man. I can't believe a lot of people aren't seeing this. But let's move on to your tight end bold prediction here. This is a rookie that you're calling for. Who is this?
Noah Fant. I know rookie tight ends. I'll preface it. I understand there is almost zero track record of a rookie tight end ever producing anything meaningful, at least in terms of fantasy stats. So my back, I know I'm going against the grain here, but I think Noah Fant landed in the absolute perfect spot to immediately be a top 8 fantasy tight end. You look at last year, George Kittle obviously has a absurd 88 catch, 1,300 yard, 5 TD season. It makes him a potential fantasy value of the year style candidate. And the best game of the year, he had a monster 7 catch, 210 TD effort against none other than the Denver Broncos. And they go out and they make sure, what do we need to go target and get is a seam stretching, yak dominating tight end style guy, especially because they hire Rich Scangarello of the 49ers, where Kittle was last year, who met with Elway and said, we need something like this in our offense. And Elway said, I think it was obvious the type of success Kittle had with Scangarello out there last year. Speed tight ends can be very effective in this style of offense. We need to go get one. So you look at 4'5", 40, 6'4". We just talked about the athleticism of O.J. Howard. Noah Fant's right up there in terms of an athlete. You look at Joe Flacco. I mean, there's tons of tweets about how often Joe Flacco loves his tight end. Over the last 3 years, he targeted his tight end on 23% of the throws, which was the 5th highest behind only Wentz, Alex Smith, Andrew Luck, and Mariota over these last 4 years. He just routinely peppers his tight ends with targets. Flacco's already out there gushing. All the reporters are already gushing. These two are connecting all the time. He's saying there's tons of opportunities for guys that can run after the catch, and Noah Fant can obviously run. There's just going to be so many chances, I think, for Noah Fant. You look at the weapons around him. I'm not a huge believer in Cortland Sutton. Emmanuel Sanders is 30-something recovering from an Achilles. I love Sanders, but that's really tough to do. Who knows what Deshaun Hamilton is? I don't see a whole ton of target competition here. I don't see a reason why Fant can't rake second, maybe even first on the target totem pole here if he is able to quickly pick this up. Of course, as a rookie, adjusting the speed is hard. Taking the hits every play as a tight end is even harder. but Fant has that athleticism to move all over the place, rack up yak in an offense that's going to design a lot. He's even been working out with Kittle this entire offseason. Both, they must just breed tight ends over there in Iowa. He's been working out with him a lot, though, to kind of be like, what type of concepts will I see? He's mentoring him and already getting an inside feel for this offense for a guy who played in it last year. I just think all of that's an unbelievable kind of recipe for a guy that goes outside of all the top 20 tight ends that pretty much goes undrafted when you do any type of mocks. Just toss him in there. I know you're a believer of this. There's no reason to take a kicker or a defense right now. Take Noah Fant. See how he's doing in training camp, because I have a feeling, as soon as he catches a 40-yard bomb down the seams in the first preseason week, everyone's going to be like, look at the athleticism, look at the role. So as long as you have that opportunity, if you're doing any type of early drafts right now, and even if it doesn't spike, I'm telling you, top 10 upside here with Noah Fant, even as a rookie at the hardest position to translate to. I love him.
I like it. Where do you have Noah Fant ranked right now?
He's my tight end 10 right now, 14 spots higher than he's a tight end 24 in the ECR, the experts ranking. So I'm up there. I'd have him, I think, about right around 100 or so overall. Right after I take, let's say, my quarterback, my Kyler Murray pick, if you will. I like to get Noah Fant, even if it is my backup tight end. He's kind of like I view. Let's say I find a safe tight end, maybe Delaney Walker, something uninspiring. It's kind of like the Phillip Rivers for my quarterback. Then Kyler Murray is my upside quarterback. Fant's kind of like that upside tight end that I think could just blow up right from the start.
Yeah, I totally see that. I mean, especially with like a defensive-minded coach where, I think Flacco is used to targeting the tight ends, but I think Fant provides a lot more value as well in the run blocking game too, where opening up lanes for Lindsey, opening up lanes for Freeman. So I think he'll be on the field pretty often, and I think that just lends to him being involved as well a little bit more often than not. So I like that, man. That's a pretty bold prediction because rookie tight ends don't usually pan out, but we did see with like Evan Ingram, coming out in his rookie year, athletic freak, coming out getting peppered with targets. I definitely think that
something like Fant, that, yeah,
right. Fant could definitely break that mold, but cool. That was our show.
Do you want to toss out your quick? Do we have time for a quick Jimmy Graham, Mark Andrews top 8?
Oh man,
I'll try not to argue with you too much. I just want to give me the lowdown. What do you love about these guys?
Sure. So I'll give you the lowdown on Jimmy Graham. Okay. So I want you guys to realize that Matt LaFleur, as much as people want to say he's a Sean McVay guy, he's not. That's completely wrong. He's a Kyle Shanahan guy, right? And with this offense, if you look at what he did in Tennessee last year compared to what he was doing in LA the year before, right? You guys remember Jared Goff and Sean McVay's first year together where Sean McVay would be like, hey, I have a headphone in Jared Goff's helmet so I can tell him how to audible, right?
Sure.
So who was really calling the plays there? Was it LaFleur as the OC or was it McVay as the head coach?
Definitely McVay. Yeah, I'm with
Definitely McVay, right? Yeah. Right. So, and we kind of see that because once LaFleur left, the same offensive scheme was still there. So it was definitely Sean McVay's offense going 3 wide constantly at the highest rates in the league. But then you look at what LaFleur did. Okay, so in Tennessee in 2018, 11 personnel plays, they called at the 7th fewest out of all 32 teams, right? 1 RB, 1 tight end, 3 wide receivers. They only called that 58% of the time. They called 12 personnel plays, meaning with 2 tight ends, 26% of the time, which was the 4th highest, only behind Houston, Philadelphia, and KC. And then 13 personnel plays, that's 3 tight ends on the field, 1 wide receiver, 1 running back. They call that 13% of the time, which was the 2nd highest, only behind Cleveland. Okay, if you look at the moves that LaFleur's made as well, where he's tried to pick up tight ends in free agency. I mean, Michael Roberts, that kind of was a wash where he got cut because of due to fail physical, but he's picked up a couple of names.
They drafted Jace Sternberger, is that his name? Yeah.
Jace Sternberger, who I think could be, I have him pretty high in dynasty rankings, absolutely. But he's a good blocker as well. And I think LaFleur utilized that H-back role a lot more often than not, especially with Jimmy Graham near the goal line. Jimmy Graham was being used in the slot, and at his age right now, that's not going to work. He's not separating well, and I think LaFleur knows how to put his guys in the best position possible. And combine that with the fact that Aaron Rodgers needs to get the ball out quick, right? That's going to be an emphasis now in this offense where you need to get the ball out quick. You can't punish your offensive line by holding on by 4 or 5 seconds. I think Jimmy Graham is a really good H-back who could clip a defensive end, or who could clip a linebacker on his way out to the flat, get a nice little dump off from Rodgers and do something with it. And, of course, the mismatch weapon, he's still mismatched towards the end zone with Aaron Rodgers throwing 25 touchdowns on a hobbled leg last year. I think that only goes up this year, and I think Jimmy Graham gets a big chunk of that as well.
My only question would be like, why would you use Graham as the H-back instead of just like one of the running backs themselves? LaFleur and them have always been so much about peppering the running backs that would be much more dangerous after the catch than a Jimmy Graham or one of their two more athletic freak tight ends. That Jay Sternberger, great run after the catch threat. Who was the rookie last year? He had a couple like beastly. I can't remember his name. He had a few great catches down the seam. And there's been a ton of training camp hype about him. I can't think of it off the top of my head. I don't know. You brought up a couple points that I think go against Graham is that he's facing a little more competition this year. He wasn't really doing it last year when he had less numbers and mouths there to feed. And it is a more Shanahan scheme than it is a LaFleur scheme. I mean, a McVay scheme, that's fine. But even Shanahan, outside of Kittle's monster year, hasn't really had these offenses, whether it was Jake and Tammy or Austin Hooper when he was with the Falcons, Johnny Smith last year. I mean, none of the Titans tight ends really did. Not that John Smith's a great talent, but he had 258 yards and 3 TDs. I'm looking at right here. I don't know if the fact that it's a McVay versus a Shanahan versus which one is LaFleur more matters so much as the fact that I don't think Jimmy Graham's that good anymore. I think they have a lot of better talent around him, and Rodgers just, for whatever reason, whether it was the Mike McCarthy scheme, whether Rodgers just doesn't like tight ends, there really hasn't been a useful fantasy tight end in Green Bay since like Jermichael Finley 10 years ago. So I don't know. I just, to me, there's just a lot more intriguing upside where Graham goes. I don't know if I see the ceiling that you're seeing here.
I see the touchdown upside here only because, he was being utilized pretty poorly in this offense last year, where he was primarily running his routes out of the slot, where he ran 535 of them out of the slot, third out of all tight ends, and then he had 36 slot receptions, which was fourth out of all tight ends. I don't think that happens. I think he's used more inline, more as an H-back, and I think he can still separate in the end zone where he does provide that mismatch. And like you mentioned with the running backs, it's always better to have other options as well, and especially with Jimmy Graham, a big guy who's probably the biggest guy on the team near the goal line. I think Aaron Rodgers looks to target him pretty often.
I can see that. When you put the ball wherever you want, and you got a 6'5" guy that's historically used his body well in the red zone, just a couple seasons removed from dominating with the Seahawks last year in that regard. I wouldn't be shocked to see him put up good touchdown totals, but even that year with the Seahawks when he was putting up 11, 12, whatever it was, touchdowns, I think he led the league in red zone touchdown percentage that year. It still was one of those things where, like, if he didn't catch a touchdown, he had maybe one catch for 5 yards and your lineup was ruined. And I get tight end, that's kind of what we're looking at as a position whole. But I'd rather have a stab at a guy that might have some yardage upside, or Noah Fant, for example, if they're going around the same area. I'd rather have someone that could be a potential do-it-all style guy versus just a red zone threat, which I think Jimmy Graham isn't much more at this point of his career.
Totally get that, and I do want that floor of my tight end as well. But great valid points there. I think Jimmy Graham is someone that I could target as like my second tight end potentially. See if he has that upside.
Would you take him above like a Noah Fant? Like, is that?
Yeah, 100%.
I don't know. Hopefully, I can convince you otherwise by the end of the season, because before the season starts, I really think Noah Fant brings a ton more upside to the table than Jimmy Graham, especially when you're looking for your second tight end. Like, do you really want just a tight end touchdown dependent guy rotting on your bench, or the guy that could be the vein of the passing attack?
That's kind of what tight end position is, right? It's just touchdowns in general.
Unless you get that one vein, like an O.J. Howard, who could go all over the place, and that's what Fant could be. Instead of an old, aging, on his way out guy that might catch 10 touchdowns, but you don't know when they're coming. I don't know. I give me the guy that could be the one that's just the focal point of the passing game, which could be Noah Fant.
Very, very fair. Very fair there.
Good.
Cool, man.
Always, as always, man. I always love going back and forth with you.
Always. The show is awesome. I really enjoy talking shop with you, man. I like going back and forth with you. I hope the listeners like it too.
It's always like it's already over. I was just like, what was that? 30 minutes? I look, it's like an hour and 10 minutes are down. Jesus, right. I never realized how much time we've been talking together. Yeah, it's always great.
We could talk shop for hours, man.
Literally, we could. I think, yeah.
Yeah. So why don't you let both of our listeners know where to find your podcast, where to find your socials, and I'll do the same right after.
Absolutely, man. So again, this is the Wolf of Roto Street. The Fantasy Fullback Dive is my standalone podcast, which you can find at ffbdpod.com or ffbdpod on Instagram. You can find our main umbrella, which is Roto Street Journal, at rotostreetjournal.com, Roto Street Journal on all your socials, and me personally at Roto Street Wolf on Twitter. So hit me up, like the podcast, listen to it. You'll hear this one on our podcast as well because I love recording this. We have tons of good like beat writers coming on, tons of other good fantasy experts coming on throughout the summer. So I'm stoked. So hopefully if this is your first time listening, you can come find us over at the FFBD pod as well.
Dope, man. Dope. I can't wait. I know, I listen to that Trevor Sikkema podcast. I listen to a couple of those other beat writers that you had on. Really good content there. So make sure you guys go follow.
That, man. Yeah.
Make sure you guys go follow the Fantasy Fullback Dive podcast. Make sure you guys follow Roto Street Journal. These guys do amazing work. Great articles. Give me inspiration for some of my stuff as well. So other than that, you guys can find me at Draft Room Pod on Twitter, Instagram, wherever. Get in touch. Get in my DMs. Let me know if you guys need advice or if you want me to explain myself as far as a couple of the guys that you heard me talking about today. But also, go visit draftroompodcast.com. We actually just finished our signed Todd Gurley jersey giveaway. We're going to be starting another signed jersey giveaway very shortly, so stay tuned for that. Don't want to miss it. I'm really excited to send this Todd Gurley jersey out to the winner, who I don't know who is yet because we're actually recording on Sunday, and I picked the winner tonight at 12. So that's going to be exciting.
That's exciting. Good stuff, man.
Hell yeah, man.
No, and any of my listeners who heard that for the first time, Sammy is just like one of the best up and coming, just like bright, unique, I love that you don't follow the consensus, but you always have your reasonings for not. It's not your ho-hum, just like usual. You have your advanced analytics, your stats that you believe in, and you justify things. As you're listening to this podcast, you could, hopefully my listeners could tell, this guy brings his heat, he has his takes, and they're very well reasoned. So even when I disagree on, say, Kerryon, I can see why he believes in him, and by the end of the season, we'll see who's right. And it's good to hear both sides of that, and Sammy always gives a very well-researched and unique opinion. So that's why I love shooting this fantasy shit with you, man. It's always a good time. You always bring the heat, so... All day.
And I can't wait to have that steak dinner, man.
I'm going to love a nice filet.
I'm making room for it.
It's going to be great, dude.
I'm going to get that porterhouse for two, right?
Yeah, perfect. Bone and filet, that's what I'm looking at, I think.
There you go. How do you take your steak?
Medium rare, of course. Come on. Are you a savage? Don't tell me.
No. I'm not a savage. I'll take it like medium.
Well done. Medium's good. Medium's fine.
I'll take medium. I just don't like too much pink, and I don't like the blood. I'm not a blood guy, so I'll take the medium. I like a little bit of chewiness, but
there you go.
Yeah, man.
That's acceptable. Medium's acceptable. But you can buy your own medium for yourself, and then I'll get my medium rare on you. It's cool. That sounds good.
Okay. No doubt, man. I'm looking forward to it. All right, guys. Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you guys next time. And until then, stay fresh.